The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of Talk Radio AM 640.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Roger, backup clock is started.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on Talk Radio AM 640.
I'm the Spaceman. This is A View from Space. I want to welcome you in right now if you're listening to Talk Radio AM 640, or if you're at work right now, maybe listening to the radio station via the Radio Player Canada app. I welcome you in. Or if you're picking me up right now on Apple Music, free, I welcome you in also. Or maybe you're what some call the best seat in the house, sitting in front of your Mac, your PC at home, logged on to 640toronto.com, picking up the live audio streaming there. I welcome you in. Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. I think it's safe to say we live in a death culture. A culture of death. We worship death. Now, I don't need to convince you of that fact. You just simply need to watch today's entertainment to see. It is chock full of death scenes and terror. And we're about to enter the Illuminati's most important, their highest witching holiday celebration of the whole year, of all the sabbats. It's known as Samhain. You know it under the name Halloween. It worships death. It's a deadly celebration for the enlightened elites who run our world and program us. This period that we're just about to enter, between October 31st, coming next Tuesday, and November 4th, is the most rewarding time to perform blood sacrifices in the witching world to the pagan deities. The elites know this. And in ceremonies over the next few days, there are going to be those macabre things going on that you see in the movies, only in real life. Pagan deities given blood sacrifices to perform what our leaders want. And I'm talking about the highest of the echelon of leadership, the people who are behind the politicians. And this out, just this week, the Halloween economy, a multi-billion-dollar business, now outpaces Christmas as a moneymaker. And this year, the calendar affords 4 full days. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then the day Tuesday for the little children. But it started last night, Friday night, with the Halloween parties, continuing again tonight, and you'll probably be driving to one right now listening to me. And you're going, you're right, that's what we're doing tonight. Worshipping the culture of death. This is the main high holiday. The highest witching holiday celebration known as Samhain. Yes, making more money now, promoted more than Christmas is. A multi-billion-dollar business is Halloween. And this year, as I say, it's got legs. It can really go because of how the calendar is. It's amazing. Now, when we were kids growing up, We always look forward to Halloween, right? Everybody has. Even your children today, if you have kids. We knew nothing about how it began or what the meanings were behind it. I reveal all in tonight's show. All we knew was that we could get dressed up funny and go through the neighborhood and people would give us candy. What great way to suck kids into a ritual of death and the death culture, no? Do this, rewarding you with sweets. The information you're about to receive tonight is going to help you understand, and maybe you're one of those people that went through your whole childhood and partially through your adult life not knowing where the origin of Halloween comes from. Now, I don't want to spoil your fun. That's not what I'm about. But it is to ask the question, should we be involved in a culture of death? A culture that worships death, that is constantly being shown to you over and over and over again. How many murders do you think you've seen on television since you were a child? You think about that for a moment. And, well, you couldn't even count. You have no idea. Every single movie has that scene in it of terror and death. So I'm not trying to spoil your fun. I just want to ask the question, why should we celebrate a culture of death? Why should we join in a festival whose history and practices are for the dead? Today, with Halloween being, I say, a multi-billion-dollar business, second only to Christmas before, now it's overtaken it, and few understand the true nature and historic foundations of this occult celebration. The word Halloween itself actually has its origins in the Catholic Church. It comes from the words All Hallows Eve, All Hallows Day, or All Saints' Day. This was a day that was set aside to honor saints. The holiday was founded to try and divert attention away from the pagan practices taking place on the 31st of October every year. The blood sacrifice, the high witching holiday of blood sacrifice for the elites, the enlightened. Some believe Irish immigrants fleeing the potato famine may have brought its origins over to North America in the 1840s. However it got here, it spread around the world in different forms. But in North America, Halloween's big business. In occult and witchcraft circles, October 31st represents a day of worship that's called Samhain. This is a Celtic New Year. So actually, I should be saying to you this coming Tuesday, Happy New Year, because it is the start of the Druids' New Year. History shows, you can see for yourself, that the Celtic people were worshippers of earth gods, woodland spirits, and sun deities. One legend actually explains that on Samhain, that holiday, the spirits of all those who had died throughout the year would come back in search of living bodies to possess for the next year. It was believed to be their only hope for entering the afterlife. It was also the day that the living were to communicate with the dead. This is called necromancy, talking to the dead before telling the future. Spaceman on Talk Radio AM 640. Halloween, the highest witching holiday on the calendar. And it'll be going for 4 to 5 days this year because of the way the calendar is laid out. I've got more next because I'm just getting started. I'm the guy to call a Spaceman. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Communicate by one source, emails. 2 addresses, space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. And thanks for the one that you've sent. I really appreciate it. They start coming in, as I say, every single weekend before the show even begins. The origin of Halloween. As we enter a elongated blood sacrifice ritual spate of days, because it's next Tuesday. It's almost going to rule for an entire week. So as I said, in occult witchcraft circles, October 31st represents a day of worship called Samhain by the Druids, the ancient Druids, who are not originating from Europe, but in fact Egypt. The fullest account of the Druids and their religion was given by Julius Caesar in his history of his wars in Gaul from 59 to 51 BC. Julius Caesar is insistent that Druidism originated in Britain, although there is no necessity to believe all of the features of that religion as it was practiced in Gaul were present in Britain. No, it began in ancient Egypt. Interpreting Druidism is difficult because the Druids refused to commit anything about their beliefs and rituals to writing. And modern inquirers are and have always been obliged to rely on the accounts of the classical authors, who have a tendency to concentrate on the ghoulish, the bizarre, and the malign. Later evidence in the early literature of Wales, and more particularly in Ireland, sheds a little more light on it. Although it's what has been preserved, went through a process of selection and modification, of course, by Christian writers. The essence of Druidism seems to have been kind of a pantheism, and links have been discerned between it and some aspects of Hinduism. Sun worship, both of them. The names of some 400 gods are known, most of whom seem to have had a very localized cult. The correct performance of ritual was central to this religion, and the prescribed pattern of ceremonies presumably constituted the greater part of the 20-year. That's a 20-year training session undertaken by any apprentice druid. Oh, there was a lot to learn. On step after step. Human sacrifice was practiced when the Druids of ancient Anglesey in Wales were attacked by the Romans in 61 AD. Their altars, according to Tacitus, were drenched with blood of prisoners, as the Romans considered Druidism to be a nationalistic religion underpinning the entire British resistance to the Empire of Rome. And they, the Romans, were determined to destroy it. In the 18th century, with the growing interest in natural religion and the religion of nature worshipping, that's what we do now with the green environment. That's how it's being hidden, this return to the nature religion. So with the growing interest in this nature religion and in the noble savage, Druidism captures the imagination of the entire European intelligentsia, the elites. In Wales, the Welsh poetic tradition was believed to have been inherited from the Druids, and Edward Williams, also known as Iolo Morganwg in Gaelic, succeeded in 1820 in grafting Druidical ceremonies of his own devising on the cultural festival. The Eisteddfod was called, an association which has lasted all the way up until today and still continues. Today with an elongated version of it from Friday to Tuesday. The knowledge was one of the highly prized possessions of the Celtic society and was taught by one of the highest classes of society, which constituted of the Druid priesthood, the Vates, or Uates as they were called, who performed magic, divination, and the bards, the storytellers. There were also female prophetesses who were priestesses of particular goddesses. They were called Veledas or Ueledes among the Gauls, and by title, like Banfili, female seer, among the Irish, Veledas often occupied sacred groves or caves, similar to those of the Greek sisters of the Oracle of Delphi, who could actually discern the future. The Druids, the Vates, and Bards were teachers, historians, astronomers, poets, the police, the lawyers, the politicians. They controlled the legal system. They acted as judges, supervised executions. Each Druid was required to learn, too, by heart, the whole of the law, teaching, poetry, story, myth, religious observance, astronomy, astrology, genealogy, tribal history. As I said, they went through a 2-decade period of education. It took 20 years for a person to be initiated into the Druid organization to become a full-fledged Druid. They also had a very fearsome reputation for magic, because you see, that's how they ruled, through terror, through threatening. They were believed to have the ability to raise storms, winds, mists, and to make the sun stand still in its course. In other words, they controlled the weather in those times. In their primitive ways, they knew how to do that, just the way the Druids do it today with the weather control that we have with chemtrails. In ancient times, it was more simple and done in areas where there was a propensity, say, for a storm, heavy wind, or a thick fog. They could divine the secret names of the gods of their enemies and call these out in battle to make the opposing tribes tremble with fear. In the middle of a war, they could even command the opposing factions to lay down their arms under such terror. More than 2,000 years ago, in the area we know now as Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales, Druidic priests capitalized on those types of fear from people by nurturing the belief that evil spirits were responsible for bringing about the advent of cold weather and shorter hours of daylight. So, to placate the spirits, the priests initiated a festival honoring the god Soen, the Lord of the Dead. The festival was on October 31st, day before the beginning of the Celtic New Year, New Year's Eve. This New Year's Eve celebration gradually grew to ominous proportions. The priests ordered the people to extinguish all hearth fires, to gather around huge bonfires on hilltops, and those fires were intended to frighten away the evil spirits to honor the souls of the people who had died during the past year. Religious rituals performed around those bonfires, too. They used to be called bone fires, and we dropped the E later for bonfire. A bonfire is just that. Heaped carcasses of human flesh burning. And all of the people were told, you must extinguish your hearth in your home. And I know you've got electricity. You rarely and maybe never have run into how you heat a home with a fireplace. You must keep an ember burning all year long in the fireplace to start the morning fire after you get up again. It's not rekindled. There is a ember that's still there, kept alive. But on one day of the year, it must be extinguished, and a new flame must be taken down from the bonfires on the hills of all of the dead burning to light your fires for the next year. But no fires could be lit for 3 days. It was to honor the souls of people who had died during the past year. Religious rituals performed around those bonfires were followed by processions back into the villages where those embers from those large fires were used to reignite the hearth fire in every single home. So you see, they were even manipulated for their warmth for the winter by the Druids on a law that said you must extinguish your flame at home and come up to them and receive the light once again. They made sure that everybody come up to the bonfires, didn't they? Because everyone needs, with the coming winter, heat. The notion then developed that the souls of sinful persons, as well as all other evil spirits, were at large in the community during that night. To discourage these mysterious entities, spirits, from acts of retribution, sacrifices were thrown into the bonfires. At first, the sacrifices were animals. Horses, popular because they were believed to be sacred to the sun god, who needed attention because he was punishing the people by giving them fewer hours of daylight. And then, of course, the ultimate sacrifice. Humans were used. So, where did trick-or-treat ever come in? Here are the 3 possible origins of present-day trick-or-treating when I return. 3 of them. Each one as macabre as the last. The Illuminati are celebrating their highest witching holiday of the year. Their most coveted Sabbat, called Samhain. Are you participating? It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. There's more right after this break. I'm the guy to call it Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Thanks so much for that one you sent. I'm on about Halloween and the symbols and the origin of Halloween. You won't believe it until you hear it. And it's real. It's true. The true origin of Halloween, otherwise known as Samhain, changed from the pagan ritual day of celebration of death as the Catholic Church branded a Christian holiday with words like All Hallows Eve, All Hallows Day, or All Saints Day as it was called. But superimposing over the pagan holiday as to just hide it, but never get rid of it. It's still here today. And now, as I opened the show, now surpassing Christmas as the most lucrative holiday season. Multi-billion-dollar industry is Halloween. And of course, the first symbol is the trick-or-treat one, I expect, right? Where did that come from? Trick-or-treat. Oh, didn't you love the disruptor presidents? Trick-or-treat that came out this week. Trump about to release new unseen information on the JFK assassination. I ask you, trick or treat? And the treat, of course, would be, we're going to really find out who did it. But we got the trick. It's all redacted information. They couldn't help you anyway. Doesn't give any more information than you ever had before. And there's thousands of pages that have been held back for security reasons. It's a trick. Supposedly showing you how open everything is when it's actually closed tight, locked up. They'll never tell you the real story. However, these shows, AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640, are all over the net. I did a few shows on JFK's assassination. I stick by my story. Check it out sometime when you got a minute. So, trick or treat, where does this come from? Three possibilities. One, in the early practice of Halloween, people were afraid of spirits doing harm to their home, so they'd leave treats outside of their homes to keep them happy. The second, the Europeans tried to Christianize this pagan ritual by calling it souling. You know, as in a person's soul. They would say, for instance, go out and collect soul cakes. The more cakes you'd receive, the more prayers you would send up for your dead relatives. And the third possible reason for the origin of trick or treat, in celebration of the recently completed harvest, the Celts, the Druids, would give offerings of food to the gods. They often went from door to door to collect food to donate to their demonic deities. And history points out that on Halloween, the Celts would terrorize the people and the countryside surrounding it, butcher cattle, take it as spoil, just to please their gods. In other words, all hell broke loose. That's, I believe, where the real trick-or-treat origin lies. Today's trick-or-treating, it's made up of going from, again, house to house as the ancient Druids did, receiving candy from all the neighbors. Even if Halloween were totally harmless and free from pagan tradition and sun worship and the death culture, I'd still be concerned about taking my kids door to door, taking candy from people that I don't even know. Throughout the rest of the year, what do? Well, we teach our kids not to take anything from a stranger, but on Halloween, oh, forget it. Break your own rules. And the spirit of Halloween, the death culture, reigns supreme. Yeah, any other time of year, you would never have your kids knocking on doors they don't know. But on Halloween, it's a different story. The Wiccan religion, I'll have you know, does not believe in a devil or a Satan. They believe in 5 elementals, which are the false gods of forces. The 5 elementals, of course, earth, wind, fire, water, and spirits. There's a couple of those playing out in the World Series this year. As I intimated last week, Houston Astros with the floods. Los Angeles Dodgers representing California with the wildfires. 2 of the elements in the World Series this year. Witches do not claim to be devil worshippers either, but they are. A lot of today's witches will hide behind environmentalism as a cover-up for the worship of Gaia, the nature religion. Gaia is, of course, the goddess called Mother Earth herself. The earth is a living, breathing spirit, they believe. That's what climate change is all about, this belief of this nature, this natural religion that they are returning to. And the monotheistic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam will be shown to be death and will be made illegal. The cause of all wars, they're going to tell you, throughout history. Redact these 3 monotheistic religions, and you will have peace on earth. All of us thinking as one, worshiping Mother Gaia. So I revealed where the trick or treat association with Halloween has come from. What about the black cat? Synonymous, isn't it? The black cat. Always been associated with witchcraft too, you know. A lot of superstitions have evolved around these cats. Not just any cat. It must be a black cat. Black, by the way, means knowledge. That's why priests wear black. Knowledge. It was believed that witches could change into cats. Some people believe that cats were actually the spirits of the dead. Friends and relatives who had died would often return with their souls inhabiting an animal, often a black cat. And you know, they're supposed to be bad luck because they are the spirits from the other side. When a black cat crosses your path, you have been hexed, a spell cast on you, singled out for something bad to happen to you. Black cats have always remained a symbol of Halloween, Samhain, all the way up to the present. On the eve before their Druidic New Year, October 31st, it was believed that Samhain called together all of the deceased, the god of the dead, Samhain, called together all of the deceased. Those dead would then take different forms, with the evil spirits taking the form of animals, and the most wicked of them taking the form of black cats. The belief in people coming back from the dead, it doesn't have its roots in Christian beliefs or Islamic beliefs or Jewish belief. It's a belief called reincarnation. Coming back from the dead. Reincarnation. A tenet of the religion of the elite, the Illuminati, the initiated ones, the enlightened ones, the leaders of our world today. Where did dressing in costumes ever originate? During this festival, this ancient festival of Samhain, there was a fire festival to honor the god of death, Samhain. Sacred bonfires lit on the tops of the hills I told you about earlier in the show in honor of the false gods. Now, after the bonfire, to Samhain, people were afraid to walk home in the dark. They were in fear of what? Being possessed by evil spirits. So, you know how they countered that? They dressed up in costumes and carved scary faces in their fire holders and held them up to their faces. They hoped that the spirits would be frightened enough and to not bother them. So think about it when you think about your costume today, on what your child is going to wear or what you're going to wear or what you've already chosen, dressing in costumes. Afraid to walk home in the dark, where it originated from. So people dressed up in disguise to fool the demonic spirits that were out that evening. It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. It's the origin. Halloween. Tonight's show. Send your emails, please, to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Thanks for that one you sent. I really appreciate it. Tonight, Halloween's origin and all of the intricacies, all of the little rituals involved in it will be revealed tonight. As I've just done with dressing up in costumes, the origin is after the fire festival on the hill to honor the god of death, Samhain. Those sacred bonfires all lit at the tops of the hills in all of the villages to draw all the people out to celebrate Samhain, the god of the dead. And when they walked home in the dark, they were in fear of being possessed by evil spirits, so they dressed up in costumes, carved scary faces in their fire holders, and they hoped that the spirits would be frightened enough not to bother them. Without even knowing it, your kids today are actually continuing this pagan practice by dressing up in costumes. The wearing of death masks is still used around the world today in demon worship. It hides your identity. You can be who you want. Scary. Hideous things are done in Satan's honor on or near October 31st, all around the globe. Halloween's history is very tainted. The stories, the legends are really thick on the evil history and the practices, not to mention crime stats from law enforcement officials. Flipping through the files, it's strange how quickly the information flows into the subject of witchcraft, Satanism, and violent crime, because now is the most opportune time, the most rewarding time for human blood sacrifices to be made by the elites to have those spirits do their bidding. Halloween is the most important festival of witchcraft. Its history goes back over 2,000 years to the Druids, an ancient pre-Celtic priestly order in Gaul in honor of Samhain, Lord of the Dead. Very depraved people, these Druids. Very clever, though, on how to be able to control the masses by just a few of knowing the knowledge and creating the fear. Has anything changed today? No. The Druids are still running the world, and it's being run the same day with just updated technology. They believe to have built Stonehenge. This monolithic stone carving in England that has massive human sacrifices taking place in ancient times. And what? Tourist attraction today, still drawing people from all over the world to that very same plot of ground. History repeating over and over and over to each culture that comes along, to each generation. Stonehenge, you see, is believed to have been erected to calculate the sun's movements and determine the exact day on which to honor the Earth Mother Goddess Gaia through human sacrifices, and so end the god of the dead. The name Halloween is actually taken from the phrase All Hallows Eve. October 31st, it celebrated the eve of Samhain, the Celtic New Year's Day. November 1st. Samhain supposedly called up all the evil souls who had died the previous year, and the demons, the fairies, the elves, the ghosts sprang up from the netherworld to ensure fertility to cattle and crops. Firstborn children were offered even as living sacrifices to satisfy these evil, demonic spirits. Made to happen, by the way, from the law of the Druids. Today we emulate these folkloric and demonic practices by dressing up like monsters, demons. Skeletons is a popular one. The undead. How many going out as zombies this year? As they go to Halloween parties and do those rituals of trick-or-treating. In 834 AD, the Roman Catholic Church moved All Saints' Day. It used to be from May to November 1st to placate the Roman worshippers of Panoma, the goddess of fruit and trees, is the official reason. I say it was to keep the Druidic practice of sun worship and demonic worship of blood sacrifices on that high holiday of the Lord of the Dead, Samhain, and just to gloss it over with a Christianized feeling. Hide it. Now, Druids in Germany, Scandinavia, did the same thing. Newly conquered descendants. So Halloween is often celebrated as the eve of All Saints' Day with the same reverence for the dead. Demons are not merely things of superstition. Symbols are the very things used by those who have embraced the occult for the conjuring of the spirits they represent. Hey, if symbols were meaningless, you could put on the walls of, say, a church with swastikas as well as crosses. They both are sun-worshipping symbols. But you could never put a swastika on a church wall today. Bobbing for apples, originally a meaning of divining the future. Jack-o'-lanterns, another one. The pumpkin hollowed out with a face drawn on it, came from a tale of a man who tricked the devil, they'll tell you, if you look deeply into it, into leaving him alone, and was denied both heaven and hell, but lights his way at night carrying a glowing coal and a carved-out turnip. Originally a turnip, they say, but I don't believe this for one moment. This is what you would call disinformation. Not true. The truth about the origin of the jack-o'-lantern is coming up on tonight's show on AVFS Talk Radio, AM 640. It will shock you. If you have a pumpkin on your window or on your porch, after hearing what I have to say about the origin of the jack-o'-lantern deeper into tonight's show, you might just go out there and remove it. But you know what? I doubt it. Yes, witches are often pictured with black cats. Practitioners of witchcraft believe these felines are the best lodging place for familiar spirits, the demons who predict the future and act as guides for a single witch or an entire coven. Ravens, owls, broomsticks, cauldrons. There's a wicked history to every aspect of Halloween symbolism and its traditions. And who gets sucked into cults, I wonder. Do you know who gets sucked into them? It's kids who are on the fringe. For whatever reason, loners, thrill seekers, just looking for acceptance or involvement in something. They usually get involved with deeper levels of occult practices once they've been initiated into the first part, the lighter side. J.K. Rowling with the Harry Potter books did much to educate children on deep witchcraft. A lot of these rituals are ultimately on a criminal level. Not just spiritual, but actually criminal. Horror movies, too, are one way that multitudes of kids are exposed to the occult, not to mention how easily accessible this type of material is on the internet. Video games are big, too, and cartoons. In school books involving spooky things, they're available at every age. Inundated in a death culture. A culture that worships death. Wow. All Hallows Eve, designed by the Roman Catholic Church to hide a pagan ritual of sacrifice of human blood to the god Soen, the god of death. As I said, the Illuminati's highest day of human sacrifice. Halloween. It's been changed over the past 30 years, too, in a couple of important ways. First, kids have been encouraged to participate by, well, getting all kinds of different inoffensive costumes and dressing up as Barbie, Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, that kind of thing. And secondly, adult costuming. And parties have reached a tremendous apex and have become the most macabre sight of all the year. Halloween. All kinds of demonic symbolism painted on people's faces, clothes worn by them, depicting death in this death culture. It's a Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm the guy to call a Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. Got some information, a critique of the show, or just want to say where in the world you're listening to AVFS on Talk Radio, AM 640 from? Send it to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Historically, Halloween is the deadliest holiday ever celebrated in human history. This satanic night is actually dedicated to the Celtic Lord of the Dead, Soen, the original name of Halloween. Changed, Christianized by the Roman Catholic Church in ancient times, also symbolized by the horned god Cernunnos and the stag god. The Druids, you see, celebrated Soen as originally a 3-day fire festival. building huge bonfires, thought to ward off demons that roamed around and control the people in the villages below. Also, the fires provided the means by which the required human sacrifice would be presented to the sun god. In enormous wicker baskets, the priests would cage animals and humans, in which they would then lower the cage into the flames. The priests would carefully watch how each victim died in order to predict whether the future held good or evil. How macabre can that be? Have you ever attended or ever heard about the Burning Man celebration? This is exactly a duplicate of it. The origin of popular Halloween traditions like free candy. What better way is there to bait children to fall into this trap? This little children, innocent little souls, fall into the trap because of something sweet. But you have to come when you're beckoned into the macabre ritual. It's pagan practices over a couple of 1,000 years old. And for the sake of their safety and well-being, people put outside their home sweets, as well as the best mutton legs in ancient times, vegetables, eggs, poultry, honey, even wine, so the wandering evil spirits would consume them on their way back to the netherworld. Failure to treat these evil spirits, well, would result in a curse being put on the house and all that are in it. The people literally believed that when these spirits came by to your door, they would trick you if you didn't treat them. The American version of Halloween came from Ireland. The potato famine in 1840 brought thousands of immigrants from the Emerald Isle who believed in this ritual. With them came goblins, jack-o'-lanterns, bonfires, apples, nuts, and, of course, the tricks. The Irish are also responsible for bringing trick-or-treating into great popularity in America. How? In Ireland, October 31st, peasants went from house to house to receive offerings to their Druidic god, Muck, as they called him. This procession stopped at each house to tell the farmer his prosperity was due to the benevolence of this spirit demon, the Druidic god, Muck, or else, if they didn't treat it correctly, something bad might happen to the farmer and, say, his crops. Extortion. Few farmers risked any kind of displeasure from the pagan deity and the procession coming by, so they would give out eggs, butter, potatoes, anything they wanted, in some cases even money. To the Irish farmers, this was no joke. They really feared the Celtic god, Muck, that he might destroy their homes and barns and crops. So trick-or-treat was a very, very big part of the pagan heritage. People would also take burning wisps from the bonfire and wave them around to frighten away many evil spirits roaming the earth. In the case of the burning wisp alone, if it didn't work, revelers clothed themselves in the most hideous and most terrifying costume. To frighten the spirits, these people believed that if you dressed in a terrifying costume and went trooping around with the spirits all night, they'd think you were one of them. And, of course, would leave you alone. Satan's obsession with fire made his followers also as obsessed with building huge bonfires in this high witching holiday, the most important in the witching world for the Illuminati. The bonfires symbolize the sun, light, the ancient Egyptian sun god Ra. These bonfires, originally bone fires, were practical because they provided the means used by the priests who put to death the human and animal sacrifices, so crucial to Halloween and the sacrifices. When the last fires died out, people would race each other down the hills shouting, "The devil gets the last one down." Probably played that as a kid. Samhain, also known as Halloween, was also the time to engage the devil's assistance in divining the future. Questions come up about what's going to happen. Are you going to be married? What kind of luck would you have? What kind of health could you expect in your later years? And the time, of course, the most important, the time of a person's death, were most popular for divination, finding out the answers from the spirits of the other world. In Scotland, young people got together for games and pulled shoots out of the ground to ascertain which of them would marry during the coming year, and in what order the marriages should even occur. This was the power of the Druidic high priests. They had power over every facet of life in those times. And believe me, they still do. The Druids are still running the world. The religion is. Paganism. For centuries, apples have been a token of love and fertility ever since the Garden of Eden. At Halloween parties, people bobbed for apples in tubs of water, and if a boy came up with an apple between his teeth, he was assured of the love of his girl. You know what they called that game? That was the ancient Halloween party game called Snap Apple. The Snap Apple game was a game the boys loved. Divine the future. Each boy in his turn would spring up to attempt to bite an apple that was being twirled at the end of a stick. First boy to succeed would be the first one to marry. Sometimes string was used to suspend the apple in the air. And now you know where the company Snapple got its name. Just another way the elites had to perpetrate the ancient pagan ritual into your culture. And also, when you split open an apple in half, it shows a pentagram, a 5-pointed star in each fruit. It's the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. There's more right after this break. Yeah, it's the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Thanks for yours. You did it as a kid. Probably, if you have children now, they've already brought home what I'm about to talk about. Their coloring expertise of owls, bats, cats, and toads for the Halloween party that they had at school. Because you see, owls, bats, cats, and toads, frogs, are an essential part of Halloween. And for a very good reason. Why? They're known as the witches' familiars. Now, a divining familiar was that species of animal whose shape Satan would assume to aid the witch in telling the future. A witch would closely watch the animal's movements, whether it was an owl, a bat, a cat, a frog, whether slow or fast, and to see the direction in which the animal would move and the kinds of sounds that it made in order to foretell the length of life or maybe even a coming illness. Other familiar spirit shapes, including hens, geese, small dogs, rats, even butterflies, wasps, even crickets and snails, which is considered these creatures to be demon-possessed, demon-controlled. So if you look closely at most Halloween decorations, you'll see the creatures that I have just reiterated to you. But now you know they represent demon-possessed creatures in the world of the occult. Toads, frogs are evil spirits, even talked about in the King James Version of the Bible. Now the jack-o'-lantern, trick or treat. There's been a lot of different names for the jack-o'-lantern over time. Been Lantern Man. There's even one they use in Europe called Hobolanger. A will-o'-the-wisp was another one. And the Lantern Man, they all get their name from a pale, eerie light that appears over bogs and marshes in England occasionally. These ghostly lights, which bobbed along like a lantern in someone's hand, were called corpse candles. Candles were said to be signals from the souls of men lost at sea in ancient times. Celts often hollowed out a turnip, say, or carved a grotesque face on it so as to fool demons. They'd carry these lanterns to light their way in the dark and to ward off evil spirits. That's what they were, bobbing on the marshes they traveled through. The turnip is still popular in Europe even today. The pumpkin has replaced it in North America. Jack, they call it, the jack-o'-lantern. Jack is a nickname for John, which is a common slang for a word meaning man. So, a man-o'-lantern, a jack-o'-lantern literally means man with a lantern, as I just described. Now here is the real truth about the origin of the jack-o'-lantern. You see, the Druids originated the practice of hollowing out the jack-o'-lanterns and filling them with human fat. Whenever a raiding party came to a home to demand of the husband that someone inside be surrendered as a human sacrifice to Soen, the god of death, they would light a jack-o'-lantern filled with human fat. That's what burned inside. And if the husband gave in, the ruler of the house gave in and provided one of his loved ones, one of his girls, as a sacrifice, the Druid party would then leave jack-o'-lantern on the porch. And this lantern would signal to tell the other raiding parties coming along later and the demonic host that this party had surrendered a human for sacrifice, and that the remaining people inside that particular household were left alone. They've paid their price, guaranteeing that no one else in the house would be killed that night was the treat. If the husband refused to surrender one of his family members for a blood sacrifice, a trick would be placed on the house. The members of the raiding party would then draw a large hexagram using human blood on the front door. Now, where they got the human blood from? They got the blood for the hexagram from a dead body they would drag around with them using a cable tow. The next procession of Druids coming along would see the bleeding blood drawn hexagram and attacked the inhabitants of the house, taking what they wanted anyway. So you lost anyway, even if you didn't give it up willingly. By doing this ritual, Halloween was a truly macabre, scary night, driving some actually insane on wondering if that particular raiding party would be stopping at their house. Oh, they went by. Later, they knew another raiding party would soon be coming. But if you had a jack-o'-lantern, a turnip filled with human fat, burning on your doorstep, that would guarantee you that no other raiding party would enter your house and leave you alone for the entire rest of the evening. A truly horrendous, nerve-wracking, terrifying night. This is the true origin of trick-or-treat and the jack-o'-lantern. Did you take your kids trick-or-treating? Or are you going to on Tuesday? If you do, or if you did, that's the true origin of the Druidic ritual that you enacted. You were the raiding party. You're about to be the raiding party on Tuesday. Forbidden practices, especially associated with Halloween, are satanic practices. They're absolutely forbidden under the penalty of death. Every one of them is uniquely associated with Samhain, Halloween as you know it, enchantment, an act of influencing by charms and incantations using the practice of magical arts. These practices draw directly on the power of Lucifer. Then there's witchcraft, dealing with demonic spirits using their prescribed methods, commonly called rituals, and the magic arts. And today, of course, thanks to J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter books, Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien, witchcraft skyrocketed to popularity. Halloween has now outstripped Christmas as the most lucrative season. A multi-billion-dollar business. TV shows that show witches are on every channel. Go to a video store sometime. Download any video and walk down the horror aisle where you'll see the popularity of witchcraft in this world today. It's peaking and getting larger. Sorcery is another one. The use of power gained from the prescribed rituals demanded by the demonic host. Once the witch or wizard performs the particular ritual correctly, the demonic host is required to provide the power to accomplish that action that is desired by the witch. Divination is another one. Fortune-telling, seeing into the future. Lucifer loves to get people consumed by the idea that they can know what lies ahead of them. Wizardry is another. Art. The art or practices of wizardry, sorcery. As a wizard or a witch, a skilled person in the magic arts, a sorcerer. Necromancy, communication with the dead, specifically conjuring up spirits of the dead for purposes of magically revealing the future or even influencing the course of events. Charm. Well, that person's so charming. It's the practice of putting a spell on someone in order to change or control their mind and or their behavior. Wizards love to get their enemies one-on-one because they can charm them, through the use of rituals done before the meeting, and by the demonic host living within them, that spirit that's possessed them. Adolf Hitler actually followed this practice closely as he dealt with the leaders of Europe, Britain, and Russia. British Prime Minister Chamberlain was totally charmed by Hitler as he tried to appease the German dictator in Munich in 1938. Chamberlain was so totally charmed by Adolf Hitler, he enthusiastically proclaimed after returning from Munich's meetings that he had achieved peace in our time, as he called it. All recorded in history. Stargazing, astrology, divination of the supposed influence of the stars and other heavenly bodies on human lives and the affairs of nations is that art. Occultists literally order their lives according to the movements of the stars and numerology. And then there's magic, tapping into the power of the demonic realm through the use of prescribed rituals so that the action carried out is accomplished through demonic power. All these activities are uniquely associated with the activities and traditions of Halloween. Original name, Samhain, for the Lord of the Dead. Another thing on Halloween, if you've been paying attention, you'll know that these practices form the heart and soul of the Harry Potter novels and movies. Harry Potter is a wizard. He comes from a family of witches and wizards. It's called generational witchcraft, just like in the real world. His entire existence within these novels revolves around the Hogwarts School of Wizardry and Witchcraft, where Harry and his friends learn all of the forbidden practices, what I named and more. J.K. Rowling made all this satanic activity seem so cool, so much fun, that tens of millions of young children have been drawn into the dark arts. It's Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. Show continues right after this. Communicate one other way besides this radio show. It's emails, space@640toronto.com. One address, the other, spaceman@640toronto.com. Thanks for that one you sent. Hey, what about black and orange? They're the colors of Halloween, aren't they? So, to contrast the pagan celebrations, the Western Christians celebrated All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day during the day with liturgies. On All Souls, a penitential or sorrow for doing wrong liturgy was offered, asking God's mercy on those souls in the Christian world. Dark vestments, black, brown, or purple, were worn by the priests, of course, meaning knowledge, black representing knowledge. And the candles used in the services were of unbleached beeswax, which would make it orange in color. See, unbleached beeswax is orange. The Druids borrowed these two colors, black and orange, for their own. And that's why the colors of black and orange are synonymous with Samhain, Halloween. The existence of satanic cults and their activities are no secret. Most satanic groups are anti-Christian, of course, rather than pagan. Since Halloween is a pre-Christian celebration, Jesus Christ, of course, not the focus, so Satanists can celebrate their alternative religion. The growing interest and belief in occult powers is one reason Halloween celebrations, with their emphasis on dark powers and death, are so popular today. For one night, obnoxious, mean-spirited behavior is okay. As a matter of fact, it's popular to do that. It's also very interesting to know that a poll, a youth survey, that found nearly 1 in 3 kids, teens growing up today, believes in the power of witchcraft. And 1 in 5 of them believe in ghosts. Almost all surveyed believe in some kind of supernatural phenomena. It shows you how far we've come, removing from the Christian ideals to the ancient pagan religion of nature, Gaia, and demonic worship. Also, let me point out something about masks. Again, that you may not know why we wear masks at Halloween. There are spiritual ramifications to mask wearing that actually have far-reaching consequences, more than anyone would ever think, which, by the way, are always used in the deep satanic rituals of today. You see, you're left vulnerable to the spirits connect with the mask. You are asking the demonic spirits. No, that's not totally correct. You are inviting them to be part of you with your mask, since masks allow you to be anonymous. You can do things that you would never normally ever do. You're putting on another persona. In short, you're being possessed by putting on the mask. We're supposed to keep our own identity. If you put that truth into a social context, if nobody wore masks, think of all the holdups and all the banks and the stores that would be solved in an instant. How about all those so-called terrorists seen in videos with their identity hidden, with scarves around their faces? The power of the mask. You see it? The day before Samhain is the last day of summer, or the old year in the ancient Celtic religion. And the day after, Samhain, is the first day of winter, or of the new year. So you should be saying on Halloween, Happy New Year, to be actually correct. Being between seasons or years, Samhain was and is considered a very magical time, because you see, it's not summer and it's not winter. It's the last day of summer, and the winter is not to come yet. Being between seasons or years was a magical time for the Druids, when the dead walked among the living, they believed, and the veils between past, present, and future were lifted in prophecy and divination. That's why this time of year, the elites of our world, the decision makers of our world, the movers and shakers, the builders of our world, do their blood sacrifice ritual ceremonies in secret. There are some evidences to indicate that 3 days were spent celebrating this festival. Philip Carr-Gomm, chosen chief of the Order of the Bards, Ovates and Druids, was speaking about Paleo-pagan and Meso-pagan Druids in England recently. He had this to say about that whole thing in his Elements of the Druid Tradition book. Samhain, from October 31st to November 2nd, was a time of no time. Celtic society, like all early societies, highly structured, highly organized, highly controlled. Everyone knew their place. But to allow that order to be psychologically comfortable, the Celts knew that there had to be a time when order and structure were abolished totally, when chaos could actually reign. And so on. Halloween was such a time. Time abolished for 3 days of this festival, and people did crazy things. Men dressed as women, women as men. This happened at Beltane, too, by the way, May 1st. May Day, as you know it. Farmers' gates unhinged. Cattle would escape. People's horses moved to different fields. You'd have to go out and look for your animals. A time of chaos. Structure abolished. Oh, bring the Druidic structure back. It wouldn't return for 3 days. But behind this apparent lunacy lies a deeper meaning. The Druids knew full well that these 3 days had a special quality about them. The veil between this world and the world of the ancestors was typically drawn aside on these nights, and for those who were prepared, journeys could be made in safety to the other side, the spirit world side. So the Druids' rites were concerned with making contact with the spirits of the departed, who were seen as sources of guidance and inspiration rather than as sources of dread. The dark moon, the time when no moon can be seen in the sky, was the phase of the moon which ruled this time, because it represents a time in which our mortal sight needs to be obscured in order for us to see into the other worlds, you see. The dead at Soan are honored and feasted, not as the dead, but as the living spirits of loved ones and of guardians who hold the root wisdom of the tribe. The Christian church was, unable to get the people to stop celebrating this holiday, so they simply sprinkled a little holy water on it and gave it a brand spanking new name, as they did with other paleo-pagan holidays and customs. Just superimpose it, hide it, but keep celebrating it. This is a form of calendrical imperialism, co-opting paleo-pagan sacred times as they had paleo-pagan sacred places. Also, most, if not all, the great cathedrals of Europe were actually built on top of earlier pagan shrines, did you know? And ancient pagan sacred groves where human sacrifices were made. Yes, all of the great cathedrals of Europe built right on the foundations of those very, very spots. So when the Christian Catholic Church tried to get Halloween removed from the Druids and the way of life and the order, it couldn't be done, so they had to superimpose their holiday on top of it so as to keep celebrating it. They do this with other holidays too, you know. Valentine's Day is Lupercalia, actually. Easter is actually Ostra, celebration of Ishtar, and Christmas, Yule, well, a celebration of the sun dying and the sun beginning to come back to life. It's Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. There's more on the Halloween tradition when I return next. I'm the guy that called the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails, too. Send them to spaceman@640toronto.com or space@640toronto.com. Now, before the arrival of Christianity, early November was when people in Western and Northern Europe finished the last of their harvesting. They butchered their excess stock so the surviving animals would have enough food to make it through the winter, and held great feasts. They actually invited their ancestors to join them, decorated family graves, and told ghost stories. the American election date was actually decided on this particular ritual, if you can believe it. Because you see, no one could light a fire, and no animal could be butchered for those 3 days. That was time of no time. That time in between time. So with no fire, no butchers, would give us 3 days of this before you could rekindle the fire from the fire, the bone fire, on top of the hill. The Druids would give you the fire of the Emperor that would light your hearth for the year, for the winter. And then you could start killing your livestock and putting up the meat to keep you through the winter. And this is exactly how the American election, the first Monday in November, was formulated. Because it was time then to again butcher the herd. And the people, the voters, are the butchered herd. Going to the polls at exactly the same date as the Druidic tradition of ritual allowed men to light their hearths again and to butcher their livestock for the winter's feed. Now, those who practice witchcraft and sorcery are experts at mixing herbs to make medicines, and poisons. They could actually curse someone by obtaining a lock of hair, a fingernail clipping, or a piece of clothing, or a personal item. Witches and other occult groups have 8 major festivals during the year. This includes the 4 solstices at the changing of the seasons, as well as October 31st, or Halloween. While most witches don't do sacrifices, human anyway, the other forms of satanic worship do, as the witches desire more power. They use the spring, the summer, the fall, and the winter as their ritual times, following the sun. They're sun worshippers. Now, if you actually take account of the missing children who disappear 2 or 3 weeks before any solstice or at Halloween, you'll see there's a huge number of people who disappear during these holidays, but are not reported where the public can see it. A lot of police and federal agencies have actual ritual abuse task forces you'd never hear about. They operate much like the amusing character played by Will Smith in The Men in Black. You know that flick? Not discussed or ever acknowledged. So, Halloween is the most important of all the fire festivals because it marks the Celtic New Year. The day itself was a time for paying homage to the sun god Baal, who had given the ripened grain for safe storage. The Celts, Indo-European cousins in India, celebrate Diwali, which is their New Year's festival that honors the safe return from dark forests of the celestial couple Rama and Sita. It's all about light, fire. The sun is God. This chief god, Baal, or Bel, symbolized the sun. The Druids thought that when the sun died or was captured at the end of October, the powers of darkness would take over. They mourned the death of the sun, since they had little knowledge of astronomy, or the physical sciences, nor the progression of the equinoxes and seasons, and thought that for the next 6 months, their sun god Baal was busy fighting enemies who were in cahoots with the Lord of Darkness, the Lord of Death, Soen, Halloween. According to the ancient myths, Soen was the time of year when remote tribal peoples of antiquity paid tribute to their conquerors, and a divinatory time, too, when the Cid, as they called it, might reveal them to the magnificent, glorious palaces of the gods in the underworld. Also, Soen was considered to be a time of dark prognostic omens and dark couplings, a time when malignant birds emerged from the caves of Grogum to prey on humans, led by a monstrous three-headed vulture whose foul breath withered the autumn harvest crops. Mythical kings, fallen heroes, were even said to have died on Soen while carousing. Ulster warriors known as the Uliad were said to have died on Soen and had met their imminent death by fire or sword at the hands of their Munster enemies on the battlefield. So for the ancient Druids, the year ended October 31st. For that was when all nature seemed to be dying out. Leaves withered, fell to the ground, plants drooped. Farmers, no more crops, all gone. All taken off, harvested. Soen was that original festival that came to be Christianized from the All Saints' Day, they call it, in medieval Europe. This is now November 1st, is the current Christian calendar. Soen was one of the 3 solar festivals marked by sacred fires and sacrificial blazing rituals. And the 1st of May for sowing was another, the 21st of June for ripening the turn of the year another, and the Vespers or the eve of the 1st of November for harvesting, Halloween. During the last of these festivals, the Druids, dressed in white robes, gathered around the cairns of the local hilltops where sacred bonfires, I told you earlier in the show, burned eternally throughout their entire calendar year in symbolic homage to their emblem of the sun. And during the height of the Druids, the priestly caste of Celtic society, all fires, except those of the Druids, on those hills, extinguished on Soen, October 31st. And if you owned a house, your hearth was cold, told to put it out, and you were given a tax, a fee, to charge you for the holy fire, which you would in turn get from their altars on the hill. Even nowadays in countries populated by a Celtic stock or lineage like Brittany, Ireland, Wales, Gaelic Scotland, or in certain rural English counties today, permeated in the past by certain Celtic influences, we still see survival of old traditions and customs like bonfires associated with the season of the Holy Souls. In Ireland, as a matter of fact, a certain custom has come to be known as Soen or La Saumon, for the Feast of the Sun. To the Druids, cats are sacred. They came to be associated with Halloween through this sacredness because they were thought to have carried magical powers that humans didn't possess. And cats, as I said before, often thought to be witches' helpers, were feared as being reincarnated souls of evil persons who had once lived before. And they were sacred in the ancient Egyptian mystery religion, too, were cats. Soen, Happy New Year! Because it's Druid's New Year, beginning of the winter half of the year. A season of Gamred and Erach as it's called in Gaelic, and is known as the days between the years, similar in function to Janus, the ancient Roman deity of doorways, who could look both ways, backwards at the old year and forwards into the new one, revealing his two faces staring in opposite directions. So you have your month of January ushering in the new year, taken from this Roman god Janus. That's what January is named after. The year, like the day, begins with the dark half first. The day before Samhain is the last day of the old year, and the day after Samhain is the first day of the new. That's why Halloween stood as a day apart from the Druidic calendar, as if it were suspended, you could say, in time, from passing of chronological and calendrical time, being between the passing of years, a time of no time. Samhain was considered to be very magical, when the dead walked among the living, and the veil between the past, present, and future, spirit world and the physical world, could be lifted through the mediation and prophecy and divination. Rituals. The word witch, huge presence at Halloween's time, unraveled itself through centuries in time from the Middle English, Wicca, meaning wizard or sorceress. The Middle Dutch root prefix, velk, meaning to separate or set aside for religious worship, implied a woman supposedly having a supernatural power by means of maintaining a secret pact of the devil or with evil spirits even of the underground world. A lot of linguists who study the etymology of words believe our modern word victim actually evolved from this ancient Dutch meaning. It's the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio AM 640. More coming right up. It's the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio AM 640. I communicate by email, spaceman at 640toronto.com, one address, the other space at 640toronto.com. So we're living in a death culture, a culture that worships death. This is the highest holiday there is of them all for death worship, called Halloween, known to the ancient Druids as Samhain, and still practiced today by our elites in control of this world as Samhain, the god of the dead. Our word witch comes from Wicca, the Middle English word Wicca, meaning wizard or sorceress. The word wicked, taken from that same Old English word Wicca, when it passed through the Middle English as Wicca, meaning akin to evil. Eventually, through the passing of time, the masculine form of Wicca took shape as a distant ancestor of our modern English word witch. And this is related to modern Germans' Weihen, meaning to consecrate, or to even the word victim, signifying someone killed in a religious ritual. So the word's underlining connotation, or I should say the word's underlining connotation, is of a priestess, Wicca. Modern German also has hex, meaning witch. That's where we get our modern English word hex, to jinx someone, from. A lot of these words ultimately trace themselves back to Celtic ancestry and to the Germanic tribes of the Angles, Saxons, Jutes, prehistoric documentation and written records. As you can see, this conspiracy of embedding ancient pagan beliefs into our vocabulary, into our history, really our whole way of life, has been going on for a long, long time. Many important mythological events are said to have occurred on that day, October 31st. It was on a Samhain day that the Nemedians captured the terrible tower of glass built by the evil Fomorians. that the Tuatha De Danann later defeated, the Ormors once and for all, that Pwyll won his wife Rhiannon from Gwal, and that many other events of a dramatic prophetic nature took place in the Celtic myths of antiquity on Samhain. In his 17th century work, History of Ireland, Geoffrey Keating wrote that the Fomorians demanded milk, corn, 2/3 of the newly born children every year from the ancient race of Numidia for human sacrifice on the eve of Samhain. A lot of these events and occurrences had to do with the temporary victory of the forces of darkness over those of light. The constant struggle or tension between the forces of duality in nature, between up and down, light and shadow, good and evil, yin and yang, signaling the beginning of the cold and dark half of the coming year. Yes, a macabre time of year where the forces of darkness, even still today, are being practiced in our world. The legendary Merlin was forerunner of all those wizards of fiction, from Gandalf all the way up to Harry Potter. The historical Merlin seems to have been something very different but equally mysterious, a druid. So who were these druids? And Roman occupation of Britain lasted up until the 43rd year to around 400 AD. Before the Romans invaded, the Druid priests were the undisputed power in that land. And for the previous 2 or 3 centuries, those Druids were a dominant force throughout what was then the Celtic world, which included France, Netherlands, part of Scandinavia as well as Britain. History is written by the victor. There is no doubt about it. This can make it hard to get a clearer picture of the people on the losing side in history. When the Romans conquered the Celts and the ancient Britons, they gave unflattering descriptions of those Druids. Some sources describe the Druids as bloodthirsty barbarians who were addicted to human sacrifice, and others would say that they were gentle, peaceful, and that they derived their authority from being in touch with nature. But here's a few things you can say for sure about the Druids. They held their blood sacrifice ceremonies in oak groves. They saw mistletoe as a sacred plant for healing. They practiced divination and believed they could foretell the future. Their powers of divination actually underpinned the Druids' entire authority. Their supposed ability to foretell the future made the Druids a vital source of information, equally able to advise the community on when to start the harvest and the king on when to go to war. Like Arthur, King Arthur's advisor, Merlin, the magician, the Druids wielded a power based on their superior insight into the workings of the universe. Knowledge. Man is God is the new religion that's coming to replace Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Man is God. Knowledge gets you there. The Gnostic religion. The more you know, the more powerful you become, until you reach Godhead. There's a debate among scholars as to whether human sacrifices were performed during Druid Celtic celebrations of Halloween, but of course modern Druids will say that they weren't. They say that the only evidence that this custom was practiced is a reference in an ancient Roman document by Julius Caesar. But we do know that human sacrifice was practiced in that part of the world in ancient times because of several bogmen, mummies preserved in the peat bogs that showed signs of ritual killing. Peat, of course, is a great fuel for a fireplace, burns for a long time. Of course, there would be no remains of any humans that were sacrificed in the fire. At any rate, the word bonfire actually comes from a compound of the Middle English words bon, meaning bone, and fear, meaning fire, meaning a fire kindled upon bones. Now, according to Dyshenko's, a medieval collection of the lore of prominent places, firstborn children were actually sacrificed before a great idol to ensure fertility of cattle and crops for the year. So an Eve was a night of dread, a night of danger. At this juncture of the old year and new, our world and the other world opened up to each other, the spirit world and the physical world. The dead returned. Ghosts, demons were abroad, and the future could actually be seen. Behind such Halloween games as bobbing for apples, Celtic divination arts, to discern who would marry, thrive, die in the coming year. Behind the masks and mischief, jack-o'-lanterns and food offerings, lurked the fear of evil spirits and the rites to perform the rituals. Julius Caesar wrote about the Celtic sacrifices. The whole nation of the Gauls is greatly devoted to ritual observances, he wrote, and for that reason those are smitten with the more grievous maladies, and who are engaged in the perils of battle either sacrifice human victims or vow to do so, employing the Druids as ministers for those sacrifices. They believe in effect that, unless for a man's life be paid, the majesty of the immortal gods may not be appeased. And in public, too, as in private life, they observe an ordinance of sacrifices of the same kind. Others use figures of immense size, whose limbs, woven out of twigs, they'll fill with living man and set on fire. The Burning Man, the Wicker Man, and perish in a sheet of flame to these poor souls that were captured to be the victims. They believed that the execution of those who had been caught in the act of theft or robbery or some crime was more pleasing to the immortal gods, but when the supply of that type of criminal failed, well, it didn't matter. They would resort to the execution of even the innocent, because the blood sacrifices had to be made. The classical author Diodorus Siculus also reported scenes of human sacrifice by the Druids. It's all documented in his classic writings. It's a Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. Happy New Year. Coming this Tuesday, which is Halloween, Samhain to the ancient Druids. Their New Year's Day. Yes, Halloween, the ghoulish festival, the favorite of children, rooted in paganism, as they're baited to participate with the promise of something sweet to eat. October 31st, spooky beings, superheroes, cartoon characters, rubberized celebrities line the streets and malls and the hallways of schools. And they're out there to party. All shouting the trick or treat slogan. And children of all ages actually get involved in this, and will again tote receptacles of various sizes and weight, harboring the result of the night's take. It's called Halloween. And, well, for most of us, it seems like a harmless annual activity. Its roots run deep in ancient paganism and ritual sacrifice of human beings. All Hallows Eve, Halloween, originated in the 7th century. It was celebrated May 13th. It was a night for remembering deceased saints and martyrs, and the day was later changed to November 1st and renamed All Saints' Day by the Roman Catholic Church to Christianize the pagan holiday Beltane and Samhain for the Lord of the Dead celebration. It goes along with the summer's festivals, the winter festivals of fire, the powers of darkness. The sun is God, you see. All over Europe, Halloween, the night that marks the transition from summer to winter, was the time of year when the souls of the dead were supposed to have revisited their old homes in order to warm themselves by the fire. These ghosts, supposedly, and ghouls walked the countryside, eating the offerings of food and drink, the treat that was supplied by the family living in the houses. Darker forces roamed the night as well. Demons, hobgoblins, witches, and broomsticks. They all haunted the night with acts of mischief, which were the tricks. Real witches, you see, were well known to celebrate on Halloween night, and the witches of Aberdeen danced around an old grey stone at the foot of the hill at Craigloch, the devil himself playing music in front of them. Modern witches, it said, and Wiccans practice similar sky-clad, that means nude, Halloween traditions, calling on earth spirits, earth goddesses, to visit their knife-drawn circles of power. It's all for the goddess of Hecate, the Titan Earth Mother of the wizards and witches. She illustrates it best. The connection between Wicca and the Celtic Halloween traditions in the realm of the supernatural evil. You see, as the dark goddess of witchcraft, Hecate, like Isis, was worshipped with impure rites and magical incantations. Her name was taken from the ancient Egyptian word Heka, means sorcery or magical, which really explains her association with the Egyptians' frog goddess of the same name. That's why Kermit the Frog was used to endear frogs to an entire bunch of generations of kids who grew up watching Sesame Street. Frogs in the occult world are symbols of evil spirits. This also explains the affiliations of frogs with witchcraft and the difference of the potions of frogwort and Hecate's hallucinogenic plant, also called aconite, which supposedly sprouts from the saliva of Cerberus, Hades' three-headed guard dog that fell to the ground when Hercules forced him to the surface of the earth. Because her followers, Hecate's followers, practiced their magic wherever there were three paths that joined. She was known by the Romans as Trivia. Tri meaning three and via meaning roads. 3 roads. Later, when the church leaders compared their magic of the goddess Trivia with God's power, they found it to be inferior, so the pursuit of Hecate's knowledge became known as a trivial pursuit, or a useless direction to learning. And of course, Trivial Pursuit, one of the most famous television shows there are. I don't need to tell you any more about how they managed to weave that name into our modern culture. Hecate. Trivia. Tri, meaning 3, via, meaning road. Yeah. You see, we're still living, repeating history of ancient times and the customs such magic illustrates how this ritual was fearfully employed by people who wanted to appease Hecate. Hecate was said to have had the ability to inflict the mind with madness. She had influence over the night creatures. She was also thought to govern haunted places where evil and murderous acts had occurred at one time. These areas where violence or lechery had a history were believed to be magnets of sorts for evil spirits, something like your haunted house today, which is celebrated at Halloween, of course. And if you wanted to get along with the resident apparitions, well, you need to make a sacrificial offering to Hecate, the ruler of darkness. Hecate's representative, which was the night owl, announced the acceptance of the offering that you gave. And those who gathered on the eve of the full moon perceived the spooky sound of the owl's hoot as a good omen. As a matter of fact, statues of the goddess made up of the triple face of a dog, a snake, a horse, watched over the dark rituals when they were performing at the crossing of the three roads, the Trivial Pursuit. At midnight, Hecate's devotees left food offerings at the intersection for the goddess. Hecate's suppers were, and left in a hurry, without turning around or looking back, because sometimes the offerings consisted of honey cakes, chicken hearts, and at other times puppies, honey, and female black lambs slaughtered for the goddess and her strigae. The strigae were deformed and vicious owl-like creatures that flew with Hecate through the night, feeding on the bodies of the unattended babies. During the day, the strigae appeared as simple old women, which accounts for the history of flying witches. The same strigae hid in the leaves of the trees during the annual festival of Hecate, normally held on August 13th, when Hecate's followers offered up the highest praise of the goddess. August 13th, by the way, was the opening of an Olympiad in 2004 at Turin. And Hecate, of course, featured prominently in the opening ceremonies, of which I covered on that Olympiad. So you see, we're simply repeating history through the ages. Now, during the day, those strigae appeared as simple old women, as I say, which accounts for the history of witches. And when Hecate's followers offered up the highest praise of the goddess, Hecate's devotees would celebrate festivals near Lake Avina in Campania, where the sacred willow groves of the goddess stood, and they communed with the tree spirits, which were the earth spirits, including Hecate. They were thought to inhabit trees and summon the souls of the dead from the mouths of nearby caves. It was here that Hecate was known as Hecate Clothonia, Hecate of the earth, translated. In other words, she most clearly embodied the popular Earth Mother spirit that communicated with her through the cave stones and sacred willow trees. Hecate was also known as Propylia, the one before the gate, it means. A role where she guarded the entrances of homes, you see, and temples from outside evils. You talk about Satan casting out Satan. She also was known as Hecate Propolos, the one who leads, as in the underworld guide of Persephone and those who inhabit graveyards, where she's also known as Hecate Phosphorus. Now, you know, phosphorus bombs are outlawed. Yeah, it's where we get our chemical name for phosphorus. That burns with a very bright light, even underwater. Yes, a lot of it. And the etymology, going back to finding the origin of this, reveals the true identity of where it's from. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm the Spaceman. There's more right after this break. The guy to call us Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com if you got a critique of the show. Just want to say where in the world you're listening to from. Or if you got some information to pass along, simply just use those two addresses again, spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. So Hecate, the light bearer, her most sacred title, and the one that's the most powerful underworld spirit there is, besides Satan, whose original name was Lucifer, the light bearer. It was her role, Hecate, as the feminist earth goddess spirit, Hecate Clethonia, that gave her the perception as being God. Now, the connection between ancient paganism and the modern customs and costumes of Halloween that we practice today, this weekend, is easy to trace. The Hecate myths adopted all through today's pop culture and symbolism. Just as in the days of Hecate, the same exact ritual goes on today, what we call Halloween. Think about it. People visiting neighborhood homes on Halloween night represent the dead in search of food, the treat. Masks of devils and hobgoblins represent evil spirits seeking mischief, the trick. Those who pass out candy represent the homes visited by the dead, or may also represent worried individuals seeking to appease Hecate and other nighttime terrors that might transpire. There have been many half-truths about this whole thing propagated to hide the gruesomest, most horrible truth of the origin of the jack-o'-lantern. The will-o'-the-wisp that I told you about earlier. And the jack-o'-lantern, the will-o'-the-wisp, the foxfire, the fairy fire, many different names. According to some histories, a wandering soul stuck between heaven and hell. Others claim that the Druids left the jack-o'-lanterns on the doorstep to ward off evil spirits. That's only partly true. I told you the real reason. The real reason, of course, is to demand blood sacrifices from those families. Another legend concerns a drunk jack who made a deal with the devil. Each claimed to be the true origin of the jack-o'-lantern myth. But I tell you now, it was in fact the Druids that were terrorizing the neighborhoods with their troops, dragging a dead body behind them, looking for blood sacrifices from houses that they would randomly pick out, choose. And if you gave someone a family member to kill, you then received the jack-o'-lantern on your doorstep to wave to the next troop coming by. They've already contributed. Leave them alone. And of course they all wore masks, so as their true identity, when seen later in town, would be obscured. And our children wear masks, go out after candy, but don't understand or even care about the symbolism. But as a parent, don't you think your responsibility to tell them is more overwhelming? Or are you so in denial of the ancient connection that you'll lie to your own children, and in doing so condemn them to continue to repeat this macabre ritual born in hell with their children? Yes, Halloween is a ritual. Halloween is a religious ritual. You can't hide Halloween's origin, but they can disguise it on the outside to make it look like, well, it's all fun and frivolity. But in fact, that demonic world has been around and influencing multi-generation, generation after generation for thousands of years. And it's the occult, the voodoo, the black magic used by the Druids to control is used by the people in control today to control you and I. They do it through entertainment. Music, for instance. When the Brits and Dutch were in the Caribbean and in South America, rounding up black people to be shipped abroad, to be sold as slaves in Europe, they allowed those black people to keep their drums, in which preserved their vital connection to the god they worshipped, who they called Orisha, Voodoo. Though the sudden mingling of so many different tribes after slavery began produced new variations of different drum beat rhythms to worship Orisha, the voodoo god, and other voodoo gods like Canobla, Santeria, Vodun. Out of this mixture of these different drum beats came music forms like jazz, the blues, the backbeat, rhythm and blues, rock and roll even, some of the most powerful rhythms on the planet came from the drum beats of the slaves who practiced voodoo in the Caribbean and in South America. Some of the most powerful rhythms ever. Even Little Richard, at one time, one of the founding members of rock and roll, famously said that he believed that rock music was from African voodoo drum beats in ceremonies to summon gods, to summon demon spirits. And there's one called Rocky. His real name was Quasi DiGiorno. He was a sessionist drummer in London, England in the 60s. He's actually the one doing all the drumming on the signature Hendrix tunes you know today, during those formative London sessions he did that kicked off his entire career. It was Noel Redding, the bass player, who was the brains behind the production, and getting Quasi DiGiorno familiar with Jimi Hendrix, introducing them both. And he was the one behind the production sound of what became Jimi Hendrix sound. Quasi's playing took him through many rock acts in London, England, in the early mid-60s. Played with the Rolling Stones, played with Ginger Baker, who was another drummer, by the way, Spooky Tooth. Now, the story goes, when he met Jimi Hendrix, one of the first things Quasi DiGiorno asked Jimmy was, where he got his voodoo rhythm from. Right away, Jimmy became a little dodgy, evasive with his answer. Never did say where he got it from. But Quasi went on to explain to Jimmy that just about all the signature rhythms he was playing on that guitar were actually the same exact rhythms that his father played back in Africa at voodoo ceremonies. During ceremonial dances, he would perform that to the rhythms that his father played to Voodoo, Orisha, Oxen, the god of thunder, by the way, and lightning, and Voodooshi ceremonies that he performed at, where all the dancers all wear their beads, which had to be worn by all voodoo dancers to carry the protection and blessings of their favorite god or goddess. Orisha is one of them. The first one to be worn is, of course, Elegua or Legba, black and red. They're designed to open the doors. These two spirits clear the way, remove barriers and obstacles in life for you. The beads are colored black and red. Other beads worn in the chain are for Ogden. Green and black they're colored for work opportunities and protection from accidents in battle. Also, white beads are mixed in the green and black. Therefore, a spirit called Obatala in Voodooism, who stands for peace and justice in all things. And the beads worn also represent Yamaya. They're colored blue and white. She's the goddess of all mothers and all seas and oceans. She actually helps protect mothers and children, promotes fertility, abundance, and calms your sorrows. And then there's the beads that pay homage to oxen or ocean, the yellow or amber ones, colored. Voodoo's Lady of Charity, oxen. She's also the patron saint of Cuba, by the way. She's the mistress of all loves and passion, brings abundance, but reminds you, abundance is in the sharing. And the red and white beads are said to this, are representative of the spirit Chango, once king of Africa. Chango promotes virility, good health, and vitality, and he'll protect you from storms in your life. Helps you in fighting your battles. Voodoo, a religion closely connected with Soen, the god of death, that we practice at Halloween. This is Talk Radio AM 640. I'm the Spaceman. There's more right after this. I'm the guy that calls the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Yes, there is coming soon, too, the replacement for the Christian, Judaic, Islamic religions. And it's called paganism. I was just speaking about voodoo. It's the national religion of Haiti as of 2003. In Canada, they've just changed the laws, struck it off the book. The law books of witchcraft being illegal to practice. Oh, an archaic old thing. Nobody does it anymore, but it's just stupid. So, no, they took it off for a reason. To condone it. The voodoo leaders, when Haiti and Aristide made it a national religion, greeted the decision with satisfaction. According to one voodoo leader, Reverend Auguste, this decree put an end to about 500 years of exclusion and discrimination to which voodoo practitioners had been subjected. Free to practice devil worship out in the open now. And millions of Haitians practice voodoo, even when they're officially recognized as devout Catholics or Protestants for a long time, and perhaps today as well. For various reasons, a lot of Haitians have tried to conceal the fact that they consult voodoo priests and priestesses, like Jimi Hendrix's drummer's dad. Knowing practitioners of voodoo have at times found themselves barred, for example, from receiving baptism, first communion, marriage, or even funeral rites in some cases. The drumming and the chanting goes on hour after hour at voodoo sessions. A goat, a small black pig maybe, or even a person. The throat's cut. The blood is sprinkled over the worshippers. The animals are thrown into a pool of brown, bubbling mud. And a lot of the blue and red robed believers jump into that pond as well. This is the climax of what's known as the voodoo ceremony of the Plan du Nord. Some 300 kilometers north of the Haitian capital, Port-au-Prince, it's done regularly. Thousands of Haitian voodoo believers make that trek each year, some of them from as far away as the United States and Canada. People will say, I come here because I have a lot of problems. The saints will help me. And it brings me and all my friends together. That voodoo ceremony is in honor of Ogu, the spirit of fertility in the earth, but also of the Catholic saint of St. James, the warrior saint. Is held every year towards the end of July. Throughout the month of July, in fact, there are voodoo ceremonies and pilgrimages all over Haiti. Voodoo believers bathe in mud. Some of the believers jump into the mud, but this year, for the first time, voodoo, recognized as an official religion in Haiti, is done now in the open. We have our own temples, they say. A voodoo priest, Fugan, tells them. We believe in God and we baptize people. We have religious ceremonies. So, of course, we are a religion. We are a church. Yes, voodoo. 2003, executive decree by President Jean-Bertrand Aristide, back in 2003, sanctioned voodoo as the official language of Haiti, or religion, rather, of Haiti. It's a religion in the same way Judaism is or Christianity is. They'll tell you. Voodoo doesn't have a sacred text, a church, or a hierarchical structure of leaders, but is very similar culturally, we're told. Voodoo, by the way, means spirit. It's probably one of the world's oldest ancestral nature-honoring traditions. And that's your operative word here, the key word, nature-honoring. Because it fits right in, and that's why it's been made an official national religion, at least in Haiti for now. At a voodoo ceremony, believers gather to make contact with the Loa, as they call it, any of a pantheon of spirits who have various functions running the universe, much like Greek gods. There's also responsibility to care for beloved and deified family spirits and to honor a chief god who's known as Bonji. During the ceremony, the Hugan, or Mambo, priest or priestess, sacrifices a sanctified chicken or another animal, or even a person, to the Loa. Participants then ask the spirits for advice or to help with problems. And more than half the requests are for health. It's said that the Loa sometimes communicates prophecies, even gives advice or warnings while the believer is possessed, and other messages are sent through the priest or priestess, or sometimes comes even later, in your dreams when you're sleeping at night. These disembodied spirits are actually believed to become tired and worn down and rely on humans to feed them in periodic rituals, including sacrifices. It's not the killing of the victims in the rituals that matters. It's the transfer of life energy back into the spirit called the Loa. Each of the spirits has a distinct identity, by the way. Some are loving and good, while others are demanding and hateful. Haitians believe that the Loa most often express their displeasure by making people sick, and in some cases killing them, dying. In the West, voodoo has been portrayed in zombie movies, popular books as dark and evil, a cult of devil worship dominated by black magic, human sacrifice, and pin-stuck voodoo dolls, none of which exist in the voodoo practices that originated in Benin. In Haiti, voodoo began as an underground activity during the 1700s. Thousands of West African slaves shipped to Haiti to work on French plantations. Those slaves were baptized as Roman Catholics as soon as they arrived in the West Indies, and their traditional African religious practices, voodoo, were viewed as a threat to the colonial system and were forbidden. The people who did practice were actually put in jail, whipped even, sometimes hung. But the slaves continued to practice in secret while attending masses. The Catholic masses. What emerged was a religion that the colonists thought was Catholicism. But deep down underneath, inside, the secret was voodoo practice. It was easy to meld the two faiths, too, because there were so many similarities between Roman Catholics' views and voodoo. Both have a supreme being, believe in the existence of an invisible spirit or demon, and they both believe in an afterlife. Each religion focuses its ceremonies around a center point, an altar in Catholicism. It's a pole or a tree in voodoo. Their services include symbolic or actual rituals of sacrifice and consumption of flesh and blood. A lot of the Loa resemble Christian saints. The Loa are the demons of voodoo. They resemble Christian saints, endowed with similar responsibilities, attributes. For example, Legba, an old man said to open the gates between earth and the world of the Loa, the spirit world. Much like St. Peter traditionally throws open wide the gates of heaven. But there are, of course, differences. Westerners tend to believe in free will and personal choice. Not so in voodoo. The Haitian people have a view of the world that is unimaginably different from ours. The Loa, the spirits, are believed to determine people's lives to an astonishing degree, as they're always present in great numbers. There might be 2 people in a room, for instance, but there will be 20 spirits in there with them. Their view is dominated by physical, touchable reality. In Haiti, the spirits are as real as your wife or your dog or your car. Like any other religious practice, voodoo brings great benefits. Participation in voodoo rituals reaffirms a person's relationship with their ancestors, personal history, their relationship with the community, the cosmos. Voodoo is a way of life to these people. I believe this religion, Voodoo, that can be good and can be evil, is Luciferianism with a different name. Because Lucifer can reward you richly, handsomely, or he can destroy you. It's a Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. It's a new religion coming. Feel it? Or are you too busy celebrating Soen? It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Yeah, it's the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. And thank you so much for that one you sent. I really appreciate it. I really do. So I've been saying on the Halloween week that's coming up. It actually started last night. It's not over until Tuesday of next week. It'll be a 5-day festive celebrating the spirit world. Well, it's a religion. As Voodoo is part of that religion. As Christianity, Islam, Judaism. See, it's the dominant religion in Haiti now. It's the national religion. As I mentioned earlier, Canada has stricken a law of being illegal to practice witchcraft in this country, stricken from the record. Why? Nobody even knew it was there in the first place, but they had to tell you we've taken it off because now there's a new religion coming. And many of the practices and descriptions of Voodoo, I believe, may sound to someone who doesn't know their religion as rank superstition. But then imagine the beliefs of Christianity told to people who know nothing about it. Telling them about the Trinity, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, or the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. Any of these practices, which very intelligent Christians believe in the fullest, would seem no less superstition to someone unfamiliar with Christianity. So, you recognize that Voodoo is Haiti's national religion. It's taken very seriously, not merely by unlettered peasants, but by many intelligent, learned members of the Haitian upper society. Because you see, it's really the elites that are driving this, the Luciferians, that believe that Voodoo, as do Western theology professors believing in Christianity, believe their religion is the true religion. The most basic concepts of Voodoo are, there's one God, very similar to the God of Islam, Judaism, Christianity. The one God in Voodoo is Bandai. And there are 3 important categories of other spiritual beings, too. Number 1 is the Loa. They're the various spirits of family members, the spirits of major forces of the universe. Good, evil, reproduction, health, all aspects of daily life. The Loa interact with the people of the earth. They mount the people or possess the people now and again during religious ceremonies, and they give messages. And even cause various good and bad things to happen to the people, we're told. And number 2, there's the twins. A curious, rather mysterious set of forces, of contradictories, good and evil. Here comes Luciferianism. I can kill you or I can reward you. Happy and sad. If honored now and again in religious ceremonies, they'll tend to help you turn to the better side of life. Number 3, there's the dead, mainly the souls of one's own family members who have died, but have not yet been reclaimed by the family. Ignored family dead, you see, are dangerous. In Voodoo, honored and cared for family dead are helpful. This is why the dead in the earthquake that Haiti went through can be dangerous to Haitians. The central and key aspects of voodoo is healing from illness. And those healing activities probably constitute about 60% of all the voodoo activity. Healers heal with herbs. Just like the pagan religion, right? Faith healing, with the help of loas, the spirits. And even with Western medicine, the priesthood of voodoo contains both men, hungan, and women, mambos. And their functions are healing, performing ritual ceremonies to call or pacify the spirits, hold initiations for new priests, new priestesses, telling the future, reading dreams, casting spells, creating protections. You see, it's Luciferianism. That's what voodoo is, too. National religion of Haiti. Yes, it's moving in a mighty way as Halloween is cleverly disguised as that religion. It's celebrated by millions upon millions. It's to change your view of religion. A new one is coming. You're being programmed for it through your holidays. Now, there are usually rituals held outside, under a rough roof kind of thing, around a potep, meaning that's a center pole. A hungan or a mambo, the priest, always directs these. Drums are always used to provide the music, and the dancing is absolutely essential to the whole service. So the drumming is the biggest thing. That hypnotic, possessing sound. Services are fully participatory. Not only the hungan and mambo, men and women, participate, but nearly everyone. A master of ceremonies is always present. A hunganakon, they call him, directing the music and the motion. The hunzi, the women only, are serving ladies, usually dressed in white. And those in attendance are nearly all participants, and most can be mounted by the loa, meaning possessed by the demons. In most services, the loa possess people. They come and take over a person's body for a time. When the loa comes into a person, that person is gone. But it's not clear in voodoo where that person supposedly goes. The body is the body of the person, but it's really the loa that is running it. If a male loa mounts a female person, or possesses a female person, he's referred to as he, not she, during the possession. Nearly every voodoo service has animal or human sacrifice. By killing the animal or the human, you release life. The loa, exhausted by the taxing task of running the universe, so they need extra energy, new energy, and they receive this life sacrificed to them and are rejuvenated. Voodoo is Luciferianism, Satanism. They're usually quite happy when they're rejuvenated from some sacrificed life force being given to them. There's two basic primary sorts of voodoo. One's called Rada. It's the family spirit voodoo. And voodoo is the relatively peaceful and happy Loa, the spirits. And then there's Petro, in some areas called Congo. This is black magic. The voodoo of angry, mean, and nasty Loa spirits. dangerous things happen in Pitro, including death curses, the making of zombies, wild sexual orgies. Now, by virtually all scholarly estimates, you can find Rada accounts for about 95% of voodoo, if not more. So the spectacular tales of black magic are very real. Petro is not typical voodoo, but it does exist. The analysis of humans having two spirits in a body, the good little angel, this is similar to the conscience of the Western understanding of people. The big good angel, similar to the soul in Western theories of one person, except for the soul is much more separate from the person than is a Western soul. For example, when the person goes before God for judgment, it's the gross bond ange which represents the person, the spirit, to God and makes the person's case. There's a spokesman, a lawyer, if you like, for you. It's the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. Halloween's bringing on Voodoo as the national, international, global new religion. I'm the guy to call a Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails, please, send them to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Voodoo, much criticized by foreigners. It's now the national religion in Haiti. Oh, yes, the world is changing. And sometimes it's simply because they profess a competing religion and don't want the people to stay with voodoo. At other times they change and say this is actually devil worship. But when speaking of Rada voodoo, the numerically primary form, it's less clear on how to describe it. There are no devils you see in voodoo. But one form of voodoo actually purports to have many evil spirits within it. Now, a lot of the non-religious aspects of voodoo, which people often criticize, really are the result of voodoo's overwhelming fatalism. The view is that to an astonishing degree, the Loa, the spirits, determine everyone's lives. The Haitian serviteur has little use for anything like the Western idea of free will, personal responsibility. And isn't that what the Western world is now starting to get rid of? Free will and personal responsibility. Moving closer to that religion of voodooism. So, they believe in voodooism, whatever has happened, it's the Loa who have caused it, not you. We have a similar situation now in the Western world. Well, it's not you that really made that mistake. There was something in your DNA, or there was something that was in your habits, caused you to do that. So it wasn't really your fault. And they'll give it some scientific name. In voodoo, what's happened? It's because the spirit caused it, the Loa. The voodoo believer is absolved of any responsibility. You know what the line is? The devil made me do it. Now, if you'd like to change anything in your life, from a current illness, say, to the fundamentals of the social system, if you're a voodoo believer, you must ask the Loa. See, one does not act on one's own. This would be counterproductive since it's the Loa who decide these things anyway. So you have to ask them to be changed. And what's more, the Loa, the spirits in Voodoo, are not very changeable. Things are the way they are because the Loa have decided it. This fatalism contributes significantly to the peasants' unwillingness to struggle for liberation. Now we're getting to the crux of control. You see how it works. Same with Luciferianism. Things are the way they are because our authorities have decided it that way. That's fatalism. And it contributes a whole lot to the peasants, yours and my, unwillingness to struggle for freedom against them. But one can. Well, ask the hard question. Is it Voodoo that has caused Haitian fatalism? Or is it the history of the African-Haitian experience that has created Voodoo's fatalism? See, Voodoo's relationship to Christianity is pretty close. The Catholic experience under the French slaves, they were forbidden from practicing Voodoo. Nonetheless, Voodoo survived and was practiced. The colonists did allow occasional dances on the weekends, and these dances were actually Voodoo services. And the liberation of 1804, Haiti, all white people were kicked out of Haiti. Many were killed. This included Roman Catholic priests. So, in 1804, the Vatican broke with Haiti and did not establish relations with her again until 1860. There's this 56-year period here where the Hoongans and Mambos built up the public religion of Haiti, Voodoo. And in a weird amalgamation of African spirit religion and Catholicism, it's what they have today. Virtually all Loa became associated with Catholic saints. For instance, Dambala, the snake Loa, is St. Patrick. Erzuli, the Earth Mother, is the Virgin Mary. The most important consequence of this is that Haitians see nothing odd at all with practicing Voodoo and Catholicism side by side. And they're often very devout about both of them. So I can't explain it. I can only describe it. From 1860 until the late 1940s, the Catholic Church waged campaigns against Voodoo. They never came to anything. In 1949, some elements of the Catholic Church waged an all-out physical holy war against Voodoo in Haiti. They burned Peristal. They burned the Voodoo shrines. And they beat, some say killed, some of the men and women that were practicing, demanding their ostracism from society. And, well, shot things up. But they lost. Voodoo went underground to some extent, but it grew in popularity in such large measure because of the oppression. On purpose? Possibly. By the early 1950s, the Catholic hierarchy halted that war, got rid of the priest warriors, and made their peace with Voodoo. Voodoo drums, melodies, incorporated into Catholic Church services. The Catholics took the position, if you can't defeat them, co-opt with them, join them. Relative peace has become between the Voodoo and the Catholics in Haiti. Hollywood's got its form of Voodoo, hasn't it? Hollywood has, know it or not, been programming you with this religion called voodoo. It's an interesting catalog of zombie movies. Certainly Hollywood has played a role in creating a popular image in the U.S. which haunts the words voodoo and zombie. If you want to know the truth about the whole notion of misinterpretations of Haiti, in case you don't know of Robert Lawless and his book, Haiti's Bad Press, is a book you might want to peruse. He tells a sad tale of misinformation, a lot of it deliberate, and a lot of it just bad journalism and scholarship. There are astro zombies. You know the movie? Runs about 83 minutes. Director is Ted Michaels. Made in 1967. Astro zombies. There's not much to be said about this movie except that John Carradine, now deceased, plays the monster. And The Carnival of Souls is another, directed by Det Killarvey, 1962 flick. A girl is haunted by a menacing figure after almost drowning. The movie's got spectacular photography. Voodoo. And then there's The Dawn of the Dead. This movie's got a running time of about 140 minutes. 4 people barricade themselves in a shopping mall to get away from man-eating zombies. This movie is packed with hardcore blood and gore and is the sequel to Night of the Living Dead. And there's George Romero's Day of the Dead. That movie, about 100 minutes long. Female scientist trapped in an army bunker with sexists, and she tries to study the zombies, but the men want them destroyed. There's another one called Dead Men Walk out of Hollywood, but voodoo. The movie has a running time of about 67 minutes. A couple of brothers, one good, one evil, battle in this flick. Includes vampires, zombies as well. And there's John Carpenter's The Fog, the movie. 18th century pirates come back from the dead to terrorize a fishing village. As the fog moves in, the people roll out dead. Then there's the White Zombie movie. Old movie, made in 1932. They were promoting it way back then in Hollywood. This movie run about 73 minutes, and now you understand each other a little bit better, says Bela Lugosi, as he turns his rival into one of his eerie slaves. This, by no means, is one of his more well-known lines from a movie, but after seeing that film, I'm convinced that it has to be one of the most sinister quotes of all time. Lugosi plays the evil overseer of a sugar mill who turns his workers into zombies to do his dirty work. White Zombie is a wonderful low-budget flick, too, with wonderful background settings that add to the eeriness of the film. But mostly, the zombies are mindless creatures that would not have hurt anybody if it hadn't have been for Bela Lugosi. So they really do not add any of the misconceptions that Americans had about voodoo. Few Haitians we do see in the film are buying one of their dead. None of them depicted as being evil. The real big misconception in that film is a carved voodoo doll. And one more note on the film. The way Lugosi turned his victims into zombies was to give them a special power that would feign death. It's the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm the guy to call a Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Living in a culture of death. Halloween's now a 4-day experience. Well, at least this year, the way the calendar falls on us. And Hollywood has been one of the main perpetrators of pushing voodooism and programming people with their movies. There's been literally hundreds of them. King of the Zombies. Director Gene Yarbrough. This one's about a mad scientist. Only this time it adds Nazis in a tropical island with more zombies walking around. Dead men walking. Which is another Hollywood movie. You can't get away from it. 1983. A movie. Unfortunately, teenagers party in the wrong cemetery. Night of the Living Dead is another flick. George Romeo does the direction. Praying for church, says Johnny. Immediately you think to yourself, you better pray, Johnny and Barbara. And the opening scene are in the family cemetery putting flowers on a grave of their deceased father. Johnny's next line, they're coming for you, Barbara, is his last. He's intending to be teasing his sister about being in the graveyard, but what he does not realize is that they are really coming to get her. After her brother gets killed by the zombie, the girl then runs off to an abandoned farmhouse, beginning her fight with the man-eating corpses. Hollywood just dishing it up on the big screen. As the flick progresses, 6 other people enter the farmhouse to get away from what the news reports call unidentified assassins. This movie is jam-packed with stiff Walking Dead and the stereotypical screaming woman. By the end of the flick, I think it was supposed to be a social statement by George Romeo. A government-made chemical somehow gets into the air and brings the dead back to life. The effects are horrible, and unless you are a connoisseur, it's even harder to sit through the whole hour and a half of that movie. Then there's The Night of the Zombies. Director Vincent Dawn. A very trashy movie with one long cannibal feast after another. Man-eating man. Then there's John Gilling's Plague of the Zombies. It's a fairly intense story about a voodoo cult in a Cornish village in England. It's got great photography. Then there's The Return of the Living Dead by Dan O'Banion directing. A spoof on George Romeo's classic that consists of the dead rising after a chemical leak. These morbid creatures are, of course, after one thing: brains. This is basically the same idea as The Return of the Living Dead, except in a more modern setting. The tanks containing some of the bodies of the living dead are now in a medical supply warehouse. So the foreman is telling the story behind the living dead and asks if the boy wants to see the tanks. To make, a long story short, the man hits the tank and it begins to leak the gas. Suddenly things begin to come alive in the warehouse, and including a dead body. The gas leaks out into the graveyard, and all of a sudden there is this angry mob of the living wanting brains. The zombies. Then there's The Return of the Dead. Ken Wiederhorn. The Walking Dead are once again in control, and they want more brains. Then there's The Revenge of the Zombies, made in Hollywood. Steve Seckley, the director. Now, the Revolt of the Zombies is a movie that lacks the style of white zombieism, but Cambodian troops are turned into zombies in that flick. And there's another one called The Serpent and the Rainbow. In the legends of Voodoo, the serpent's a symbol of earth. The rainbow is a symbol of heaven. Between the two, all creatures live and die. But because he has a goal, man can be trapped in a terrible place where death is only the beginning. And it's pertinent for me to add this, because from what I've learned, the concept is a bit distorted. Distortion is probably the best word to describe the whole movie that this quote was taken from, The Serpent and the Rainbow. It's based on the Wade Davis book of the same title. From what I understand of what was said in the flick, his account of Haiti is somewhat distorted as well. Hollywood, as everyone knows, has its own little problem with distortion. So the movie version is even less credible than the book. In every movie, I think that's true. The serpent is probably a reference to the Loa, the Damballa, in Voodooism. He is, if anything, more of a father figure than an earth figure. The earth is a cruel place painted in this movie, and the Damballa, the evil spirit, is thought of as a protector. The rainbow is probably a reference to Aida, his wife. She's not the symbol of heaven, because the Haitians don't believe in heaven, but the spirit world instead. Together, they are the forces of human sexuality. Basically, the movie's about an American scientist who goes to Haiti to find the powders that create zombies. And for the most part, if you know nothing about Haiti, this movie would be rather hard. You should have some knowledge of the Duvaliers, the Tonton Macoute, the Hoongans, to make some sense of that. The Duvaliers, by the way, ran Haiti for many, many years, politically, crushing the people. Then there's the movie Shockwaves about Voodooism. Peter Cushing leads a brigade of Nazi zombies to power the Third Reich's submarines. This is actually so bad it's funny. Then there's Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, Hollywood put out, about voodoo. A fortune teller tells some terrible secrets that may or may not have zombies. Director Steven Tyberg directed Voodoo Dawn. That's another movie about two college buddies visiting a friend who is being turned into a zombie. Now, in this movie, a Bokor named Macoute goes around killing the Haitian migrant workers in a southern town. He then makes them into zombies and has them work in his fields. He then gets his idea to make a zombie man. He begins to gather bits and pieces of people to make up this man. When all is finally complete, Macoute slashes his wrists and lets the blood drip into the zombie man's mouth. In the meantime, the migrant workers, led by a mambo, a woman spirit, decide to kill Macoute. They surround his house, and when he comes out, they attack him and get a piece of his clothing and use it for a voodoo doll. With this doll, the Mambo kills Makut, and they burn his body. All seems to be well, except for by this time the voodoo man has come to life by now and was not very happy to see his master a clump of ashes. After a long battle between the voodoo man and the hero, the voodoo man loses his head, literally, and dies. But for the grand finale, this demon thing looking like it came straight out of Aliens bursts out of the voodoo man's stomach and actually tries to eat the hero, but the hero kills the demon thing too. So the hero and the pretty girl live happily ever after. Can you imagine? Boris Karloff did one called Voodoo Island. Oh, they've been doing this a long time. This is a 1957 flick about voodoo. Businessman goes to investigate strange happenings in Haiti. And, of course, they're missing people and murders and... There's so many. Sick. Really, movies that have come out of Hollywood. Zombie Island Massacre in '84. Corpses come alive on a Caribbean island. Went straight to video. It never did go into the theaters. But in this movie, you don't even see the zombies. All they do is the killing from behind the scenes. The plot's a group of tourists who go to the islands and watch a voodoo service, and during that service a lamb is sacrificed and the tourists are disgusted. When they reach the tour bus to leave it, it's broken down. What a coincidence. And you know, of course, what happens. The tourists decide to walk through a jungle, and they're attacked by the zombies. Horrible acting, horrible special effects, but it got the message out from Hollywood. Voodoo's coming. It's getting popular. Spaceman, Talk Radio, AM 640. More next. I'm the guy call a Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Final segment in tonight's show. Not only are all the zombie movies that are still being churned out, television, Hollywood studios, there's J.K. Rowling's witchcraft cleverly hidden in the Harry Potter books. You've heard of Professor Severus Snape. J.K. Rowling took his name from one Lucius Septimus Severus. As all emperors were, he was from a wealthy, distinguished family of equestrian rank. He was the Roman emperor who turned Rome into a military dictatorship. He also restored the northern part of Mesopotamia to the Roman Empire. Little is known of his father. His mother, Fulvia Pia's family, moved from Italy to North Africa and was one of the Fulvius gens. Fulvia Pia's family were an ancient political influential clan which originally had plebeian status. Professor of Transfiguration was Professor Horace Slughorn, the potions master in the Harry Potter books. And then there was Professor Albus Dumbledore. Full name, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. This is the character J.K. Rowling stated was gay. Albus is the Latin word for white, by the way, especially the flat white of stones of clothing, Albion, an ancient and poetical name for Old Britain, comes from the same root. Matter of fact, here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, where AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640 emanates from, we have a road called Albion Road. Albus, the Latin word for white. And Percival, the knight of King Arthur's Round Table, who was granted a glimpse of the Holy Grail. Albus shared his name with the father and Percy Weasley. And then there was Dumbledore, as Professor Albus Dumbledore, as I'm explaining. 18th century English word for bumblebee. Rowling says she wanted to associate his name with bees because she imagines him wandering around the castle, humming to himself. Yeah, right. Bees. They're mentioned quite often here on AVFS, on Talk Radio AM 640. They're an ancient Egyptian symbol for royalty. Interesting, isn't it? The word Dumbledore has another possible important meaning. Although not widely known, an alternate meaning for the word Dumbledore is a style of hat that was made semi-popular in London in the 1880s. Taking this meaning into account, Albus Dumbledore, that name would have the meaning white hat. As I'm sure you know, that is a phrase used for a hero or protagonist of a story. J.K. Rowling named her great champion of good white hat, Albus Dumbledore. This info can be found included in British literature in the 19th century. Dumbledore was nearing his 18th birthday when he left Hogwarts in the month of June, but was still 17 when he met Grindelwald. The two make plans to find the Deathly Hallows. This is Book 7's name in the books of J.K. Rowling. And it creates a world in which the Muggles, you and I, would be subservient to wizards and witches, who are the Illuminati. The sun cult, moon cult battling here. The Brotherhood of the Snake in action, changing and reshaping the world through chaos. This partnership fell apart after a couple were involved in a three-way duel with Aberforth Dumbledore that resulted in Ariana Dumbledore's death. Grindelwald then leaves England and soon steals the Elder Wand and built an army, rising to power in continental Europe. In 1945, his former friend Dumbledore confronts him and defeats him in what became a legendary duel. That legendary battle, known to you and I as World War II, right there in code, really, in J.K. Rowling's 7th book, The Deathly Hallows. Grindelwald, by the way, is also a municipality in the district of Interlaken in the canton of Bern in Switzerland. The home of Adolf Hitler's favorite composer, by the way, Wilhelm Richard Wagner, who loaded his music with all kinds of Masonic symbolism. Grindel, of course, is an old German word for bolt, and is similar to the mythic monster Grendel, who was defeated by a Beowulf. Beowulf, of course, the longest English poem in all of history. As a matter of fact, it was a movie, Beowulf. Wald is German for forest. Grendel is a trollish creature descended from the bloodline of Cain in the ancient poem Beowulf. A movie that was recently released, as I said, and Angelina Jolie, of all people, played Grendel's mother. I'm told also that Angelina Jolie was pregnant at the time of that shooting of that movie. Dumbledore's ancestry is half-blood. His mother, Kendra, was Muggle-born. You know, Muggle means in J.K. Rowling language, one who possesses no magical powers. That's you and I. The mother, Kendra Dumbledore, accidentally killed in 1899 by her 14-year-old daughter, Ariana, who was supposedly mentally unstable. Her father, Percival Dumbledore, imprisoned in 1890 at Azkaban for an attack on Muggles when Albus Dumbledore was about 10 years old. Albus had a scar in the shape of the London Underground logo above his knee, as a matter of fact. And all of this included in J.K. Rowling's books on Harry Potter. You talk about teaching witchcraft. And Professor Minerva McGonagall, Professor of Transfiguration. Minerva equates with Athena. Minerva, of course, was the virgin goddess of warriors, poetry, medicine, wisdom, commerce, weaving, crafts, and the inventor of music. There are a couple of headmasters known to have held that position more than once. They were Minerva McGonagall and Albus Dumbledore in her books. Wilkie Twycross. You know, Twycross is a small village, civil parish in Leicestershire, in England. It's named Twycross because its center lies at the intersection of 3 roads. I brought this up earlier with Hecate. The Trivial Pursuit. Twycross is the home of the world-famous video game developer Rare, who has developed games like GoldenEye 007, a lot of the Donkey Kong games from as early as Donkey Kong County in 1994, and as recent as Diddy Kong Racing in 07. You know the myth. The devil always meets you at the crossroads. This was made most famous by the blues guitar player Robert Johnson, who I talked about not long ago on this show. The song Crossroad Blues is one of the most famous songs. The lyrics plainly have the narrator attempting to hitch a ride from an intersection as darkness falls. The legend of Johnson selling his soul to learn to play a guitar is said to have taken place at Rosedale, Mississippi, the intersection of Highway 8, Highway 1, located on the 33rd degree parallel. Another less common belief is that the crossroads of the intersection of Highway 49 and 61 in Clarksdale, Mississippi. This is a belief of Bob Dylan, who wrote a song who called it Highway 61 Revisited. Yeah. There's a caretaker called Apollyon Pringle in the Harry Potter books. Apollyon is taken from the Greek name meaning destroyer. It's a play on the name Apollo. Apollo was the son of Zeus and Leto, and the twin brother of Artemis. New Testament of the Bible, Apollyon is actually called the angel of the bottomless pit. In Hogwarts history, as your first year as a student at Hogwarts, the School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, first year of their magical education, typically young people. The second year as magical education of a higher level. Third, fourth year, then you are a full-fledged witch. Yes, I believe the religions are changing, as you can tell by the entertainment that I've told you about for the last 40 minutes or so. This has been A View from Space on Talk Radio AM 640. Coast to Coast is next on Space, and I'm